Welcome everybody. And what are we going to do tonight? Tonight we're going to talk about knits, embroidery on knits. And it seems that's what we do a lot of. Why? Because we have husbands and kids and family members who want something on a shirt. Knits are a challenge because they're stretchy. They stretch in all directions. So what do we normally do? We do t-shirts, sweatshirts, lycra. Oh, if you're a beginner, don't start with lycra, okay? Performance wear can be a problem, like Under Armour can give you problems. Dry fit, golf wear. Why is it a problem? Knits they stretch in like all directions and up and down, in and out, I swear, everywhere. A lot of knits are flimsy. A lot of them are slippery. They slide all over the place. They're clingy. And if you don't have the right design on a knit, can make them very uncomfortable to wear. There can be scratchy. And a lot of times we'll have family members and friends give you this one-of-a-kind shirt that's like 90 bucks and say, here, could you put my name on it? And you don't want to ruin it, you know. And those are the ones you ruin. I recommend that if you ruin a shirt, don't get upset about it. That now becomes your new test shirt. Just keep using it over and over to test designs. In fact, a good place to go to get practice fabric is at the thrift shop. Get some Under Armour, get some PK knits so that you can practice designs, mostly because a lot of factors make knits impossible to sew with. The fact that they're so slippery, the stabilizer that you're using, and also the biggest thing is to make sure you've got the right design for that particular knit. And also we'll talk about placement, where to place those t-shirts, how to hoop a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or any of that. We're even going to talk about swimwear a little bit because that's four-way stretch. First of all, let's talk about designs. Not all designs are appropriate for knits. Satin stitches, and specifically the ones that are built into our machine. And I did these two fonts. And I'll show you different why some work better than others. Is like these are both built into my machine. This one right here has no underlayment. What causes the most problems with puckering, and puckering is the biggest problem that you have with embroidery on knits, is the fact that if it doesn't have proper underlayment, it's going to pull in. A lot of lettering has just a single run going down the middle of it, and that's sort of it. And it may have a contour, which means it's got a stitch going down either side of a satin stitch. But unless it has proper underlayment, you're going to have problems with it, which is why big letters cause problems. It's also a problem why little letters cause problems with distortion on the knits. The design itself can have a big impact on how much puckering you get. There's quite a bit of puckering because look how wide those satin stitches are. They're almost half an inch wide, and it caused a lot of stretch. This is an old t-shirt. I had it stabilized, but even before I stabilized these, I heavily spray starched these. Most times with knits, you can reduce some of the problems if it's a fabric that you can put spray starch on or Terriol Magic. That will reduce a lot of the puckering that can go on. And you get more distortion with actually small lettering because it digs in. So you see how the thinner the satin stitch, the more that digs into. You almost don't see the bottom part of this R. Another type of design that causes a lot of problems are fill stitches. You know, where you've got really heavy fill stitches, that can cause some problems. Applique is a good thing to put on a knit because you almost get no distortion because that extra fabric is now causing it to be more stable. It was badly puckered. However, I have found with knits, you can disguise most of that by turning it over and pressing it on the wrong side till it's flat. If you get a lot of lettering problems where you've got a lot of puckering, well, this one's not too bad. No, but if you have puckering between letters, take a sharp knife and sharp scissors or a seam ripper and go underneath and cut the stabilizer between the words, and that will free it from the back, and that'll help pull that out. Especially with the large applique, the large embroideries. The large embroideries cause t-shirts to become uncomfortable because you've got give all the way around here, and in the middle you've got tight. Especially if it's on the back. A lot of people think the big embroideries on the back look really nice, but most of them are uncomfortable to wear because that t-shirt no longer moves once it's embroidered on the back. So you can feel it and it doesn't give. A lot of times you want to have a lot of openness, which will help. Appliques help, but of course, applique now completely stabilizes that. So if you were to put this on a sleeve, okay, that sleeve is no longer comfortable. A lot of times if you've got something big like this that you would want to put on a sleeve, I would recommend stitching it on something else and appliquing that big piece to the sleeve, and therefore that sleeve still retains its stretchability, because we wear knits because they're comfortable. On the Terriel Magic commercials, they will talk about if you take Terriel Magic to a t-shirt, you don't need to put a stabilizer, that you just can stitch right on the t-shirt. That's never worked for me, and I've had it so stiff that t-shirt could stand up by itself, and I still got distortion and everything else if I tried what they said on the commercial. You want to have the right stabilizer for a knit, and you have to use, especially because it's a garment, you need to have a cutaway stabilizer. Most of the time I will use a no-show mesh. It comes in black, white, and beige, and right now I only have it in black. It's non-woven, doesn't provide any stretch whatsoever, and that's what you need underneath of a garment, not just for the stitching, but you need that to look nice for a long time. So therefore, like this shirt's been washed several times, and yet everything is still nice and flat and straight and looks decent. What doesn't look nice are when you buy embroidered t-shirts, because they will use a tearaway stabilizer on the back, and then what happens when you wash it, you get all kinds of rippling and distortion, and it sometimes will not press out, and you walk around looking like a teenager who doesn't care how they look usually. All wrinkled, they don't care. So that's why you don't use a tearaway as the only stabilizer. You can use a tearaway, but it's got to be used in conjunction with a cutaway. There's different types of cutaway stabilizers. For t-shirts, I exclusively use the no-show mesh because it's light and softer and it's more comfortable. It's easier to hoop, it's easier to use. Can you use a regular cutaway? Yeah, it'll work fine. It's just a little heavier, and if you have a light t-shirt, then it's going to shadow through. You'll see that white ring around your embroidery, and you don't want that to happen too. So that's why I like to use the no-show mesh, not necessarily in black. You can also dye this stuff. You can take the white one and dye it any color you like. So if you have a gauzy knit shirt that you want to use as a beach cover-up, use the white and then dye it the same color as the fabric, and it won't show at all. Yet this is enough to keep a design looking good for as long as it's being washed. This will only support a design up to 8,000 stitches, and a lot of times our designs have a lot more than that. Yet I rarely will put more than one layer of this. If I need extra stabilization, I will float layer after layer after layer, up to 3 or 4 layers of a tearaway underneath of this. And then you end up getting a better stitch out. But even if this were 25, 30,000 stitches, this will keep that design looking nice through the laundering process. A lot of times you'll see red work or line designs, just line work looks very nice. But if you're choosing line work, make sure it's nice and bold, that it's at least a long bean stitch. If you're digitizing it yourself, you're going to want that stitch length to be at least 2.5 to 3 millimeters long each stitch, so that you can see it over a knit. If you go down below 2 millimeter stitches, it digs into the knit and you'll never see it. It's going to look really spindly looking. It won't look as nice. So if you're doing any kind of line work, red work, or whatever, make sure it's nice and bold, either a double or a triple stitch. You keep that in mind if you're going to do line work. This will also come in a fusible and a non-fusible. With a knit, it must be fused to the fabric in some way, shape, or form. Fusibles, that'll come no-show mesh. fusible, but if you're doing a nylon shirt or a pure polyester, not a poly cotton, that can usually take a little more heat. But the fusibles are only used on cottons. But say if you have a nylon shirt, nylon knit shirt, like activewear, that's nylon, you can't fuse it. So what else can you do? Well, you can spray it. You can either use the KK 2000 or the 505 spray. You can use pretty much any other brand as well. I like the 505 because it really doesn't have an odor, neither does the KK 2000. This is a lighter adhesive than this one. I get better results if I use this. It's more tacky. The other thing you can also use is the sticky back stabilizer. It's not my favorite. That's this kind where it's got the paper release and it's sticky. These I have problems unless it's brand new stuff that it ends up gumming up my needle. Also, if you end up pressing this, sometimes it sticks to the back and you can't get it off. So there is a purpose for it. We'll talk about that later, but I rarely will use this. Mostly it's that gumming up issue. There's a water soluble adhesive called Aquasat or something like that. It's got a water activated adhesive on the back. And then you just take a damp sponge, you use it just like the sticky that you would wet it, let it tack up for a minute, and then put your shirt on top of it, then let it dry or put an iron to it to speed up the drying. And now that's good and stuck, and it won't come out until you wet it again or steam it, and then it'll come out easily. Cottons and poly cottons, I have no problems with using fusibles. They work just fine. And it's mostly what I do use. With a knit, no matter what the knit is, you have to use a topping. And what is a topping? It sits on top of the hoop and you stitch over it. And then when it's done, you tear it away. And what that does, it's going to give you a nice, even stitch. If you think of knitting, anybody who knits or something, you have like knit and purl, and it causes these ridge. Say you have a satin stitch going this way. Well, what's going to happen is if the needle hits the yarn on the knit on the top, it's going to sit up. You'll be able to see it. If it falls in the purl section, which is in between the knits, it's going to dig in and it gives you a very uneven line. Now, this one, if you can see this, this has got problems for several reasons, but look how uneven that is. And you can really see where it hits the knit and where it hits the purl. It digs in and then comes out. And so you end up with a very uneven line. What the topping does is it allows those fibers to go right on either side of that stitching line or that satin stitch and gives you a nice straight edge to it. There's different kinds. This one is water soluble. It mostly tears away, but then you can take a damp cloth or a sponge and dab it and it'll come right out. And then when you wash it, it's completely gone. The other kind is like plastic. We used to use dry cleaner bags in the old days, and this is, I guess, the modern day equivalent of a dry cleaner bag. This goes away with the heat of an iron. And you think, okay, well, so does a dry cleaner bag. And then you spend months trying to clean that iron. It's not going to work well. This is designed so that you hit it with an iron, it turns into a plastic ball. You run it on a paper towel and it just falls right off the iron and just beads away. You can pull off little plastic beads and it goes away. You want fleece to have a topping on it. However, fleece, you can't use this because fleece is made of nylon. The temperature it takes to melt this stuff is going to melt your fleece as well. So this is only for cottons and maybe poly cottons. I wouldn't use this on a polyester or a nylon. Okay, needles. We're dealing with knits, especially if you're dealing with a lycra. Lycra is nasty stuff. It's got rubber bands in there, little fibers of elastic. If you use a sharp needle, that's going to split those elastic bands, and you can end up getting like a spidery mess looking around. You'll see where the lycra pulls away. from the design when it's worn. So with Lycra, you have to use, I would use nothing but a ballpoint or a stretch needle. Everything else you can pretty much use an embroidery needle, because an embroidery needle is not a sharp. An embroidery needle is it's almost a universal point. It's slightly rounded, so therefore it can be used. If you're sewing on a knit, especially Under Armour, it doesn't like to be sewed on, and if you try to use an embroidery needle, you'll get skip stitches all over the place. You have to use a stretch or a ballpoint needle and have a good tearaway. And probably with Under Armour, you would use a full-fledged cutaway, because you've got to have something for that thread to grab onto. And it does not want to grab onto that Under Armour high performance fabric. It doesn't like it. Oh, if it doesn't work, use a Microtex or use a top stitch needle. Well, those are sharp, so they're going to end up splitting the yarns, and you end up getting running. And that's happened a few times where I've taken a really slinky knits that are really nice and stretchy, and they come in all kinds of prints. They make really nice t-shirts and stuff. Well, if you use those with a Microtex or a top stitch needle, and then you go to wear it, you're going to find all around the bottom of that, especially if it's a single knit, you're going to get running. And I have had that happen to where the first time I wore it, by the end of the evening, I had runs going up and down the shirt. Looked horrible. Mostly I will use just the regular embroidery needles. I don't have too many problems with that. If you're embroidering and you start to see puckering happening, stop and immediately float a piece of tearaway stabilizer under the hoop. And that usually will stop the puckering. So let's take a look at what we did here. This one is the first one I did. I used the no-show mesh. I didn't adhere it at all to the fabric whatsoever. And what happened is that I got substantial puckering. Although it's hard to see on camera, I'm looking at, I can see it fairly carefully, and I'm going to draw where the knits are. And you're going to see them go around. I'm just following. This one went this straight. This one went off this way and down. Okay, that's what happened to my knits. There's quite a bit of distortion. And it's hard to see here, but it literally puckered almost a quarter of an inch underneath of this. Now this had no underlayment. It just went right into these wide stitches. There is substantial puckering, even though I had Terreal Magic, spray starch, you name it on here, it still did it. It didn't do it as bad on the narrow knit. Now we like to use this font, but we did get some. Let me see how much we got here. Actually, I didn't get too much. Here's some here. Here's some here. Okay, this one didn't pucker so much on this one. But because there's no topping, these ridges, well, ignore the bad bobbin on the back. But look at that line. Look at how uneven that line is. It looks terrible. Okay, so that's with no spray, just the stabilizer. And also with shirts, I prefer to have them hooped with a standard hoop. A lot of times we like to use the magnetic ones. Yes, they're good. However, if you can hoop a shirt, it's best to do so. You're just going to get a better stitch out than you will if you float it. I did the same letters the second time around. This time I used a spray. And now I've still got distortion, but not as much. It's going like this. This one went this way. This is this way and down. This is a lot less distortion. Still have bad lines. They're crooked and everything. This one still has distortion, but not as much. Very little, actually. And this is using this spray. I'll show you why what happens and why it does that. Okay. If I just hoop the knit alone, while that looks nice and flat, it isn't. See how as the needle moves, how this fabric is going all over the place? I can literally pick it up. That's why you get all that distortion, because that needle and those threads are free to pull that fabric every which way. But if you spray this first, and you can actually make a spray guard. Say if you just wanted to float it, because a lot of people don't like to use sprays because it makes a mess of their hoops. And this one, yeah, it's dirty, but these will clean with alcohol. Out of a piece of cardboard, you can make a mask, a spray mask. So you could take that and spray this. And you don't need much. And I'm just going to place it down, and I'm not hooping it. See, now I get no distortion. See, it's not moving. This is staying still. I can't move the fabric, and that's going to make your stitches nicer. The next attempt I did, this one here, I sprayed and I floated. Just before I started stitching, I took a piece of the tearaway and I floated it underneath, and it really made a big difference. So it's the same stabilizer, the same spray, the same design. At least all the lines. Okay, I have a tiny bit of distortion here. A tiny bit here, but everything else is pretty straight. And I have it straight all through here. Everything is straight, even though I got it crooked. So this gave me the best result of all. Nice and flat. I had very little puckering. It wasn't able to grab that fabric and pull it in, even though I've got huge 1/2 inch satin stitches. And now I still have some problems with these lines. Are still not straight. You can see the laddering going on. And then the last attempt, same letters, same everything, but this I added the topping. The topping made all the difference in the world. Look how straight this is. That line is perfectly straight. So when you take off just pull in towards your stitches. Don't pull away because you might pull them out. Always pull your stabilizer in towards the stitching. Okay, and you can, but this is perfectly straight. You cannot see that laddering going on at all. So and it rips out really easy. You get the same result with this other one that goes away with the heat. But I don't use that very often. I like this one. But this is everything is straight. There is no distortion at all. There's no distortion at all here. So this turned out much better. And again, when I'm done, you just tear this away. Okay. If you had gotten puckering between the layers, then you would just trim all this away. I will leave like 1/4 of an inch around it. One thing about the 505 spray, it is tacky at first, but if you leave it, just let it sit out in the air, after a couple of hours, it dries up and there's no more tackiness. Now the KK2000 will be gone. It'll air dissipate within 2 hours. It'll be gone, which is great if you're using with velvets or something like that, because you don't want to risk pulling the pile out of the front. But it's got a much lighter adhesive. It doesn't hold as tight. The 505 spray works better. See, now in between in between the letters, that's able to stretch, where the other ones, it is not able to stretch between the letters. This turned out the absolute best. So my suggestion is for any kind of a shirt or t-shirt or a knit is that you spray with the 505 spray or use a fusible. If you can, if it's a cotton, you can use the heat fusible. Those work really well. What's nice about the heat fusible is that if you fuse it down with an iron, when you put your shirt together, it only go about 10 seconds, if that much. And then when you're done embroidering it, you can pull most of it away, and then you tear away like you would this, and you would save these pieces that you cut off, and instead of throwing them away, like you would say if this were fusible, and say if you were using a metallic thread, you would probably say, well, this isn't a fusible, we'll say if it did. If you're using a metallic thread, this would be uncomfortable against the skin. Then you would take a piece a little bit bigger and then put it on the back and fuse it for about 30 seconds with steam heat. Then that becomes permanent and it guards your skin against, especially with metallic threads. Metallic threads are very scratchy, especially if it's for a baby. Even this can be scratchy to a baby, so I would put this on top. They do sell a nylon tricot type covering. I think they call it soft cover or something like that. It's the same thing. It's nylon tricot interfacing that is just cut over. But, you know, why buy extra interfacing when this works just as well and you've got lots of these little pieces around? Okay. Lycra. Okay. Lycra is a 4-way stretch. This isn't a Lycra, but it is a 4-way stretch velvet. It goes equally in both directions, especially if you're doing a leotard or swimwear. If that Lycra is going to be loosely worn, you know, it's not form-fitting, it's not like a leotard, and it's not like a swimsuit where it's just a beach cover-up or something. You treat it as if it's a regular knit, nothing special. But if this is going to be worn and it's form-fitting like a leotard or a swimsuit or something that's going to fit tightly, what happens is if you stitch it in its natural form, when it's worn, it stretches, and which means the fabric stretches and it gives you that puckery look really bad. If it's a solid one and you had stretched it when you sewed it, when they were done and it was no longer stretched, it would dome up. So what you would do is I would see how big your embroidery is, measure it. This is the only time I will use a sticky stabilizer. You would hoop your stabilizer because Lycra is hard to hoop. I think this is 4 inches here. The design is finished 4 inches, which means when it's done, whenever you put it on, it's also got to be 4 inches. So you would try the outfit on the child or whoever's going to wear it. They take a box and draw out 4 inches. So this is when it was put on, it was like that. Okay, so you would then take this. T-pins work better, actually. Put on a flat surface. Roll up the sticky. And here I drew a box showing the 4 inches while it was worn, because when you look at it now, it's only like 3 inches. Then you come over here and you have a line, so I'm less matching up the bottom here, sticking it down here. And stretch this out the same amount and stick it down. take pins and pin it in. I like to use quilter's pins because they're curved and they're easier, so this would allow you to pin it in. While it is stretched. So you want to embroider, you would want to embroider this while it was stretched. When you finished embroidering it, and it'll look like a dome, and that's okay. Because when they wear it, then it will go back out and it will look just fine. So that's how you're going to treat a lycra. See if there's anything else I missed. Needles. Okay, the sticky back stabilizer. Another problem I have with it is it gumming up needles. So if you are using a sticky stabilizer, use a titanium coated needle. And I would not use a wash away behind a t-shirt or a garment, because it'll be all washed away and it's not going to hold up during laundering. Sweater knits, you will use those the same way you would a t-shirt. Although if you're using a sweater knit, you want to lower the stitch count, and sometimes you can. Also, sometimes in your software, depending on the software you have, sometimes you can take a regular design and change the recipe for it and tell it you're using a knit, and therefore it will change the stitching and change a little bit of the characteristics so that it'll give you a better stitch out. Okay, let's talk about placement. Here's your t-shirt right here. Here's the front of it. Say you want it to be a left chest application. There's all kinds of products you can buy. I think Dime has got something called the Embroiderer's Helper, which is a square plastic tool that tells you where to put the center of your design or a monogram or whatever. But the easiest way is to take your shirt, fold it in half lengthwise, and do a crease down the middle. Press a nice, good crease. Okay. Then you open it up. You don't even need to have a ruler. You just take a piece of paper. So you're going to take your paper, put it half on the center front, find the edge here. Okay. Do that right here. You can use a tape measure too, but I have one right here, and go halfway. Okay, then that's one axis. Then you do the same thing here. You're going to go take the top of the shoulder, the bottom of the arm's eye, which is right here. It's actually about the same right here. And go in half. And you can take a ruler. I'm just drawing it here. And this would be the center of your design for your left chest. If you are not sure, it's best to print out your design, place it, try it on, see if that's where you like it. So even though you have the guides, the best thing to do is to just simply to try it on, put your design in there. If you like where it is, that's fine. That's where you're going to use it. So now to hoop this thing is I am going to take some pins, and I'm just going to put a couple of pins to mark the lines so I can see them on the back. All right. Okay. Turn that t-shirt inside out. And I usually will spray my stabilizer. I'm going to spray the stabilizer in its relaxed form or a fusible. Okay, this sort of the middle. Place this here, fuse it down, and just, okay, now you're going to turn it to the back. get my hoop. I like if it'll fit, if depending. I usually will not hoop this way because you've got to fight this in order to get it into the machine. I usually will have, no, this way. I usually will hoop it this way so that when I go to take it out, it's all, the loose ends are on the inside of the machine. Okay, so we'll go this way. You place it, you're going to reach inside. Okay, and you can see your lines. Sort of get that in the middle and place this here. Now I can see where my middle is. I know I'm going to also have to flip the design in the machine because that's my top. Put in, you want to do this on a slippery table. Move that over. Get this as in the middle as you can. There. That way a little bit more. Okay, and where's my, there. Loosen this. Put two sides in. Before you get that last side in, so make sure it's nice and straight. And little, there we go. And now it's ready to embroider. And see now, everything's coming out this way, because if you had gone the other way, all of this fabric would end up being over here. So you got most of the fabric on this outside. And now that's ready to embroider. You just, what you can do is you can take binder clips or pins and hold this out of the way while it's being stitched. They have these, what do they call them? Hoop guards. And the hoop guards are used before you put the top in. I've never used them, but I have them. And then this would fit in like this. And this fits in this side. And it helps keep the fabric out of the way. I've never used them, but I have them because I buy everything at these shows. See, this helps especially for onesies, but this will keep things out of the way and will keep this from flying up underneath and getting caught. And it comes with 4. You could put, if it's a onesie and you're really having to tunnel in, you can really put these in, and they go before the top ring goes on. Like I said, I've got them. Do I use them? No. Okay, then you would take your pins out, and now, you know, this is going to be the top of your, no, this is the top of the design. Reorient your design and stitch it, and it fits underneath that machine. And just before you stitch, you're going to float a piece of the tearaway underneath, and you're going to put a piece of topping on the top as well. A lot of times it helps to do the basting stitch that are on our machines in order to help hold everything in place. Okay, any questions? Y'all ready to go out and stitch some knits? I think that's all I have. If anybody has any questions about doing knits, and so yeah, it's getting time for school, so we will be all doing shirts and stuff for our grandchildren again.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Yes.
You were showing your t-shirt with the applique.
Mm-hmm.
How did you attach that?
It was in the embroidery. It was just like regular applique. It
I
was
mean,
all one design.
but I thought you were doing it separate, like a patch. I'm sorry.
No, not, you talking about this one?
The one with the little sewing machine, was that a patch or was that
No, that
an
wasn't, that
applique?
was a regular applique.
Okay, all
When
right.
you sew on a patch, I would use, you just, do it on a piece of, knit the same or piece of felt or something like that, and then just do a running stitch around it.
A running stitch.
Yeah, just, just a light running stitch. Okay, good night. We'll see you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.